This war is different. In this war, he's taken on a functioning democracy in great hearts. I know Dad's Army is a comedy, but there are moments here where it just feels like it's Dad's Army, in that people really, really, really do not want Vladimir Putin as their boss, as their president.
Good evening. This is a Ukraine special of In Conversation with Yvonne Ridley, and I'm going to talk to renowned journalist and war correspondent John Sweeney, who is in Kiev. The former BBC investigative journalist, no longer constrained by the corporation, gives his analysis on the fast-moving situation and a chilling insight into the mind of the Russian president. What are you doing in Kiev? Everybody else is heading out, and yet you're in the opposite direction.
Which is always the interesting place to be, Yvonne. So yeah, I'm here in Kiev because I could not believe that Vladimir Putin would attack this beautiful city. And now that he has, I think he's made a terrible mistake. I think he's made a miscalculation. And he's living, I actually don't think he's mad. And I've got a Ukrainian friend of mine who's a psychiatrist, a guy called Semyon Guzman, who was the first psychiatrist back in '71 inside the Soviet Union to blow the whistle on the Soviet abuse of psychiatry. Semyon says he's not mad, he's bad. He's becoming like Hitler. And in the sense that he's going around invading countries as Hitler did, invading Czechoslovakia, invading Poland, I think that's true.
I mean, you've spent quite a bit of time studying Putin as a journalist. In fact, you're probably one of the biggest thorns in Putin's side from the media world.
Yes, I have. But I think he's made a mistake in taking Ukraine on. Now he's done. So he launched a war in Chechnya, partly because the population there were Muslim, and partly because it was still kind of inside the old Soviet Union, wasn't its own country. Then that war happened. It was, and the West let him get away with it. It was brutal. What the Russian army did was they committed war crimes, but Putin got away with it. Then there's the war in Georgia. Georgia had been foolish in mucking around too much in the way the Ukrainians have been way more disciplined. And again, I think Russian money and the heft of the Russian economy meant that the West didn't want to tangle properly with Putin. Then he takes a bite out of Ukraine, eastern Ukraine, and the Ukrainians aren't ready for it and they don't know what's hit them. And the West give them a pass on that. Then Putin helps the war in Syria, helps Assad defeat democracy in Syria. And again, the West are torn about that. And again, they don't want to stand up. They don't want to lose Russian money. Londongrad likes its dark Russian money. This war is different. In this war, he's taken on a functioning democracy in great hearts. I know Dad's Army is a comedy, but there are moments here where it just feels like it's Dad's Army, in that people really, really, really do not want Vladimir Putin as their boss, as their president. The idea that President Zelensky is a Nazi, him and his prime minister, they're Jewish. They're not very Jewish. I think they probably eat bacon sandwiches, but they're but they're not Nazis. Their heels do not click. That's all nonsense. So it feels like over the last couple of years, Putin's mind has become calcified and rigid, and there is nobody around him at all who says, "No, boss, this is a mistake," or if they do, they're out. So
do you think he imagined that when the Russian troops came into Ukraine, that people would be waving flags and welcoming them in.
That's
you think the
exactly,
resistance has shocked him?
Yes. So what he thought, so what Semyon thought, the Semyon put it like this, that Putin thinks that when the Russian tanks get here, they'll be greeted with flowers and parades. Because his mindset is somebody, he's very much an heir to Stalin. He thinks that that everybody wanted to be part of the Soviet empire, and it was a tragedy it was broken up. And it was broken up because of the CIA, etc., not because ordinary Ukrainians or Poles or East Germans actually didn't want to be part of the Soviet empire at all, full stop, because it was rubbish and brutal and actually really a projection of Russian imperialism rather than anything else. So Putin's mindset is locked in a kind of Brezhnevite nightmare, and there is no one around him that says Brezhnev's dead. And this war feels like the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. What was it, in 79? Mm-hmm. When Brezhnev wanted to do it, and his generals thought it was a mistake, but the Minister of Defense didn't dare tell Brezhnev it would be a mistake. And this has happened. Now, what's happening on the ground, the Ukrainians are reporting this, and I'm stuck in in curfew in Kiev, so I can't check it out. And also it's happening in Russia. But there's a report this morning that 5,000 Russian soldiers waiting to invade the Ukraine are not moving because they're refusing to do so. So there is talk of mutiny or potential mutiny by the Russian army because they don't want to fight. And here's the proof of this. I am in central Kiev, 20 minutes walk from Parliament, from the presidential office. And you can hear no explosions. Now this morning, every now and then, the Russian missiles come and they try and knock out the main power station, which is on the east bank of the river, away from the main city of Kiev. And Ukrainian air defense knocked the Russian missile out of the sky. So we have 4 or 5 crumps a day, some of them in the nights. And each time the Ukrainians knock out the Russian missiles and the power stays on. I'm still here. I'm still wearing my silly orange hat that keeps the tanks away. So there is a kind of strange, very, very strange war whereby Putin has expressed his wrath and he's controlling the machinery, but the machinery isn't working. And so it feels a bit like the Wizard of Oz, when the Wizard of Oz pulls the levers and then the little dog comes, and the little dog is Ukraine, and sort of, moves aside the curtain, and you can see this silly old man huffing and puffing and pulling levers that don't work. That's what it feels like here.
I mean, we've seen extraordinary scenes of civilians, ordinary Ukrainians, being given really heavy-duty weapons. You drew the analogy with Dad's army, but in a light-hearted way. And we're told that the civilian population has been taught how to make petrol bombs, Molotov cocktails, and the like. But it doesn't seem as though the resistance, or the civilian resistance, is as chaotic as it sounds.
No, it's not chaotic. It's very, very well organized. There have been, at the moment, what Putin's plan is to use helicopters and paratroopers to land in air bases, take over the air base. Then that would provide an air bridge, and then you could bring many more troops and the big Russian jets, so that you then got to start, and then the tanks and the artillery cross the border. All of those light forces have been blocked and destroyed. Soldiers have been captured, and the soldiers are telling at least some Ukrainians on social media, I had no idea that we were going to Ukraine. I thought it was an exercise. I didn't know. And the problem is, now Putin can do big war. It can still be very dangerous because what he can do is, out of anger, he can fire his rockets, not nuclear rockets, but big nasty rockets, cruise missiles at Kiev, and blast it because the government is not surrendering. He could do that, but that would make his position domestically far worse.
Yes, this isn't playing very well back in Russia, is it?
And Russia is not a democracy. So like, okay, people are saying, well, there's only a few thousand on the street. Doesn't matter. Those few thousand are incredibly brave, incredibly, unbelievably brave, and they're taking the fight to the Russians. And inside Russia, you have an argument about whether this war is right. And the good people are convinced the war is a mistake, it's wrong, it's part of the nightmare nonsense going on inside Putin's head. So this is not good for Vladimir Putin. I say again, I believe he's made a miscalculation.
And what about the West's role in all of this, and NATO? They've made it quite clear we will not be putting boots on the ground in Ukraine. And yet they appear to have been not goading Ukraine into standing up to Russia, but the role hasn't been one of diplomacy.
Well, how can you, I mean, like, diplomacy is always a bit of a fantasy, but with someone like Vladimir Putin invading another country, that's out the way. Now, I understand the reasons why NATO doesn't want to have boots on the ground, and I agree with them, because it would be a terrible escalation. At the moment, it's not necessary. What the West can do is to shut down dirty Russian money, kick it out of Londongrad. Now that's going to have consequences. For example, for the British economy, good. We can all afford to buy a place in London again. Wouldn't that be nice? But at the moment, I don't think we're doing enough to sanction Putin's proxies. People like Roman Abramovich. Is his yacht okay? Is his money okay? He stepped back from running Chelsea, but he still owns it. Hello, he is a proxy. He denies it, all of that stuff. But anyone who makes the kind of money he's got $13 billion. That's his estimated wealth. That is dependent upon the goodwill of the master of the Kremlin. So the West needs to act against these people, something we can do, and we're not doing it effectively. We've done a little, we should do more and better.
But now, won't that take years?
No, you can knock all Russian banks off the SWIFT system like that. You can do that tomorrow, and they should do that tomorrow.
So why aren't they?
They're not, because money is important to them, but they are going in the right direction. But they've knocked off some of the Kremlin's favorite piggy banks. But what you do is you throw that piggy bank away, and then you find a new one and a new one and a new one, and also there's ones with a little bit of Western ownership. The West has got to be much more methodical and aggressive with this. It's kind of like playing whack-a-mole. Bang, 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 bang.